Okay. Okay. So shall we start? Yeah, okay. Well, so hello everyone. Well, thank you very much for coming. So today I will give a brief introduction about my research program. Actually, since my PhD, I have been working on the interface between machine learning and soil carbon science to explore those key mechanisms in soil carbon cycle for carbon neutrality from a global perspective. What motivated my research is the current climate crisis we are facing. Basically, we are living in a warmer and warmer world. In the past 10 years, for example, almost each year, the global mean temperature is increasing into a new record. And actually, the warmer climate has further caused those disastrous extreme events. For example, the drought, wildfires, flooding, leading to a series of crises for global food security and biodiversity. But what's the causes of the global warming? So if we look at the IPCC report by the United Nations, actually we will find that the almost conclusion from this report is that actually the ever increasing greenhouse gas emission from, for example, the carbon dioxide emission from human activities is the reason for the unprecedented global warming we are experiencing. So following this conclusion, if we want to bend the warming curve to avoid the most dangerous climate disasters by the end of this century, for example, we need immediate carbon dioxide emission reduction. And in the meantime, we also need to create so-called negative emissions to remove the existing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere so that we still have some hope to halt the global warming curve within, for example, 2 degrees Celsius in the next few decades. But how could soil contribute to this ambition? Basically, in global carbon cycle, we know that while the plants and oceans are playing active roles to remove the carbon dioxide, the soil system is also a huge carbon reservoir, accounting for more than 8 times the amount of carbon stored in global vegetation with durable persistence. So a direct implication from this huge carbon reservoir is that if we could increase the soil carbon storage by even a small fraction, actually the resulting carbon sequestration will be substantial. For example, a famous initiative called 4 per mil proposes that if we could increase the soil organic carbon storage by, for example, 0.4% each year, actually the resulting carbon removal will nearly compensate all the carbon emissions from human activities during that year. And if we further look at the composition of the soil carbon, actually we will find we can either promote the formation of organic matter in soils via those biological processes, or alternatively, we can also accelerate those geochemical processes to form more those carbonic minerals, that is the soil ion carbon sequestration. But a grand challenge remains if we want really manipulate their storage across different scales. That is, actually, we know very little about those key biogeochemical mechanisms informing the soil organic and ion carbon, especially at the global scale. So addressing this challenge requires innovative solutions. That is why in the past few years, I have been working on leveraging those mechanism modeling, big data, and importantly, the artificial intelligence to uncover the new understandings of soil carbon cycle. So in the next few slides, I will introduce 2 stories in my research program. One is about soil organic carbon during my PhD at Tsinghua University, and another one is about soil ion carbon since my postdoc at Cornell. And in addition, at the end of my presentation, I will also introduce a bit about our most recent progress in innovating the AI tools. So first, when it comes to soil organic carbon, the first thing I want to convince you is that this is a really old question, which people have debated over centuries on how the organic matter forms and stores in soils. Actually, I made a literature review a few years ago and found that basically, at least as early as the time of Charles Darwin, people already noticed that there are organic matters in the soils. But at that time, people called the soil organic carbon as the so-called vegetable mold. And Darwin summarized this observation in his book in 1830s, writing that basically soil organic carbon may be deriving from some effects of vegetation. So this observation actually is quite accurate. Now we have known that plants they first sequester carbon dioxide in their in their biomass via the photosynthesis, and further transport those organic matters into soils via their rooting system or later force. So if there's no plant carbon input, there should be no organic carbon. But this is not the end of the story. Actually, in the past few years, we further found that soil microbes are operating a huge below-ground factory that can further process the organic carbon from the plant carbon input, either decomposing them back to carbon dioxide or alternatively, generate some other useful organic matters in their growth and turnover for further stabilization. And actually, this microbial carbon partition is critical because potentially it can determine the final fate of organic carbon. Even if there's, for example, even if there's high amount of plant carbon input, it's still the microbes to decide how much carbon can be potentially remained in the soil versus how much will release back to the atmosphere. So now actually we are, facing a conundrum. On the one hand, we have the very original source of carbon from plants. On the other hand, the microbial factory is further processing those materials. So if we want to promote the soil carbon storage, the first thing we need to know, scientifically, is that in the competition between the plant input and the microbial activities, which one is more important than the other, right? So that we can manipulate that specific process to effectively promote the soil organic carbon storage. So to resolve this issue, we do have a few approaches in our toolbox. First, for example, we can leverage the mechanistic modeling, which conceptualizes all the processes that I mentioned above into a series of mathematical equations, such that we can simulate the dynamics of soil carbon from our process understanding. And in this case, all the results are 100% interpretable so that we can know, which process specifically is regulating our final simulation. But the weakness also comes from this kind of theoretical simulation, because when we are using different models, or even the same model with different parameter values, we found that those models can generate an array of possibilities on soil carbon cycle. And in this case, using mechanistic models alone is no longer enough. We do need some real-world data to calibrate our model simulation results. Unfortunately, in the past few decades, we have gathered tens of thousands of soil organic carbon data across the world, and all these measurements are realistic quantification to soil organic carbon storage. With further leveraging some conventional machine learning methods, we can further interpolate those site-level information into the graded global maps with high accuracy. But this approach also has its weakness. That is, even if we can accurately quantify the soil organic carbon storage, it's very difficult for us to uncover those underlying mechanisms. That is, the processes, for example, the microbial activities in regulating the soil carbon storage. And this actually further hinders the scientific significance of those machine learning related approaches, right? So you can see actually there are pros and cons of these different tools. And actually, you probably you have already noticed actually they are somehow complementary to each other. And the issue is that how can we effectively combine different approaches together so that we can effectively tackle our scientific question. And that is why in my PhD, we developed this PRODA approach, that is process-guided deep learning and data-driven modeling to address this issue. And you can see from this figure, in the PRODA, we first integrate the big soil data with the mechanistic models using a ground truthing method so that we can retrieve those site level parameters that quantify different processes for the mechanism model. And further, we leverage a deep learning algorithm to generalize the site level results to the global scale. And in this case, with the product approach, we are able to let the mechanism models accurately simulate the soil and carbon storage. And more importantly, with using this approach, we are able to uncover the spatial patterns of those key mechanisms underlying the soil and carbon storage. For example, the plant carbon input and the microbial carbon use efficiency, which is a gate parameter to quantify the microbial carbon partition I mentioned earlier. And this is very exciting because this is for the first time at a global scale, we are able to put these two mechanisms together to compare their relative importance to global soil and carbon storage. And as you can see from this figure, actually we designed a deterministic simulation experiment to quantify their relative importance. And in these experiments, for each time we focus on the influence of one process to the global soil and carbon simulation. And basically we just inhibit their spatial patterns in our simulation to see how will this influence the final simulation results. Basically, we use two metric to indicate such kind of influence. In this figure, the y-axis indicates the changes of model performance in predicting the spatial patterns of soil and carbon, whereas for the x-axis, it's indicating the absolute error in simulating the total soil and carbon storage. And in this case, actually, you can see the more deviation means actually the corresponding process we are investigating is mechanistically more important to global soil and carbon storage, right? And basically, we found that actually changes in the microbial carbon use efficiency is far more important than plant carbon input in influencing the global soil and carbon storage. We can see actually, from this figure, without considering the spatial variation of microbial carbon use efficiency, the modeling accuracy will be, significant influence by such kind of procedure. And meanwhile, actually, the global soil and carbon storage estimation error could be as large as 800 gigaton carbon, which is much larger than the influence from other processes, for example, the plant carbon input and the decomposition processes in the soil system. And actually, this finding has direct implications in prioritizing our strategy to promote the soil carbon storage. We further conducted another experiment where we no longer ignore their spatial patterns, but instead we gradually change the values of different processes to see how the changes will influence the global soil and carbon storage. And we found that, in comparison to increasing, plant carbon input, increasing microbial carbon use efficiency is far more effective in promoting the soil carbon sequestration. For example, if we can increase the microbial carbon use efficiency by even 2%, there will be 10% increase in global carbon storage. And this number corresponds to over 100 gigaton carbon removal, accounting for the total carbon emission from human activities in the past 10 years. So a brief conclusion would be, in my story regarding the soil organic carbon, actually we found that the microbial carbon use efficiency is far more important than plant carbon input in controlling the soil and carbon storage. So in the future, if we want to promote the global soil and carbon storage, it's probably will be a effective approach for us to first manipulate the microbial carbon use efficiency so that we can remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And remember that this is only half of the potential of the soil system because within this soil system there's another carbon giant that can be managed by human activities. Actually, since my postdoc at Cornell, I have been concentrated on, the soil ion carbon sequestration. And the enhanced raw weathering is the idea to promote the soil ion carbon storage, basically by applying ground silicate rock dust from mining industry into the cropland. We hope to accelerate the weathering processes where the silicate minerals will react with carbon dioxide and eventually form the carbonate minerals that can lock the carbon over tens of thousands of years. And following this idea, actually, a previous paper has estimated a maximum of 2 gigaton carbon dioxide removal per year globally via the enhanced raw weathering. This potential is huge. And actually, to put this number into a context, basically in the year of 2024, the total carbon dioxide emission equivalent is about 40 gigaton. So basically, enhanced raw weathering alone is trying to solve 5% of the total issue, caused by the carbon dioxide emissions from human activities. But the key questions remain in this field regarding whether this huge potential is really realizable in soils, because originally the idea of enhanced raw weathering was from our understanding of the rock-water interactions on the bare rock surface. But now we are talking about the soil system, where many biological or biogeochemical processes may be involved to influence the final efficacy of enhanced raw weathering. So what is the key biogeochemical processes to regulate the carbon dioxide removal capacity and the timing will be the most important scientific question we need to resolve. So to fully address this challenge, basically, we need to understand the complex interactions between those geochemical, biological, and human management processes. For example, specifically, in the soil system, there are dynamics of soil pH, also the secondary mineral dissolution, as well as the formation of bicarbonate and carbonate minerals. That is, the carbon dioxide removal we are concerning. But on the other hand, biological processes, for example, the decomposition of soil organic carbon will supply the partial pressure of carbon dioxide. And on the other hand, the biosynthesis will also, create organic acids, which will actively exchange cations in the soil system with other agents. All this process will also, impose influence on the formation of soil ion carbon. Not to mention that basically we are talking about, the cropland management in the cropland. Basically, how much silicate rock dust will be applied into the soil versus how much fertilizers will be applied into soil is another level of question we need to concern in applying the enhanced raw weathering to sequester carbon. So to put all the geochemical, biological, and management process together, in the past one year and a half, I developed a new mechanism model from scratch called cosine to understand their influence on carbon dioxide removal. I won't go through the details of this model, but here I want to highlight that basically in the cosine model, we have two modules represented by these two matrix equations. One is about soil organic carbon, and another one is about soil ion carbon dynamics. And we considered many, first-order principles, including the mass balance, chemical reaction equilibrium, and also the charge balance. And also in the meantime, we explicitly represent five external processes to drive the mass alterations, including the parent and enhanced rock weathering, carbon dioxide dynamics, and also the leaching, as well as the nitrification to indicate, various of, processes in the soil system. And with using this model, we uncover some key limitations on carbon dioxide removal by enhanced raw weathering. And first and foremost, actually, we found that although the enhanced raw weathering, the idea was from the geochemical reactions, but soil biology and mineralogy will impose significant regulation on the carbon sequestration. And specifically, actually, that's mainly because when we are talking about the weathering, we are talking about how to consume carbon protons from different proton providers so that we can dissolve those silicate rock minerals. But actually, this does not necessarily mean, when the weathering is happening, there is carbon dioxide removal, because, only when the carbonic acid from the carbon dioxide is proton providers, then actually there's carbon dioxide removal. But in the soil system, actually, in addition to carbonic acid, both the organic acid from biosynthesis, as I mentioned earlier, and also the clay colloids may retain quite a number of acidity, which could be potentially contribute to the weathering processes. And in this case, actually there is a competition between these different sources of protons in the soil system that will eventually influence the carbon sequestration. And actually, to address this issue, we need to first trace the contributions of the different of different sources in enhanced raw weathering, so that we can further attribute their contribution to the final carbon removal, right? And in this figure, actually, you can see the black line indicates the required protons in the weathering to support the enhanced raw weathering processes when a certain amount of raw dust has been applied into the cropland. But meanwhile, different colors indicate different proton sources, including the carbonic acid shown by the pink color, and clay colloids shown by the blue color, and the organic acid shown by the yellow color. So we can see that actually at the very beginning, carbonic acid only contributes very minor part of the required protons. But instead, the clay colloids and organic acid, they are contributing most of the required protons to silicate weathering. This actually is indicating, at the beginning of the enhanced raw weathering, there's no much carbon dioxide removal happening, mainly because actually, carbonic acid is not functioning. But this pattern does not last forever, because in terms of acidity, both the clay colloids and organic acids can be regarded as a weak acid. And therefore, eventually, there will be a saturation for them to contribute to protons. So after that saturation point, there will be a recovery of the soil system, where the carbonic acid will gradually enlarge its contribution to support the weathering. So what does this mean to the carbon dioxide removal? If we directly calculate the cumulative carbonic formation across different soils, we will find actually there's a significant time lag in realizing carbon dioxide removal, at different soils. For fertile soils with more organic acids and clay colloids, such as alpha soil, as shown by this, red lines, the time lag could be over a few decades. Whereas for degree soils, such as oxysoil, actually the time lag is only for a few years, and then there is a significant accumulation of carbon sequestration. And this figure actually is directly indicating that if we want to set our decarbonization target within a few decades in the future, actually applying enhanced raw weathering in fertile soils may not help much. But instead, applying enhanced raw weathering in degree soils, for example, those tropical or subtropical soils, probably we can harvest a significant amount of sequestration within in the near future. And also, in addition to soil biology, we also investigate how the human management, specifically, the nitrogen fertilizer application may influence the soil ion carbon formation. I know basically there are complex processes in nitrogen cycle, but here I want to emphasize that basically, when there's a net nitrification process, there will be strong acid, such as the nitric acid generated from this process. And actually the strong acid will further influence the enhanced rock weathering, mainly because, different from the weak acid, such as the organic acid, once the strong acid is contributing to the silicate rock weathering, there is no recoverable processes by the carbonic method, because apparently nitric acid is much stronger than the carbonic acid. So correspondingly, there will be a permanent reduction from the carbon dioxide removal capacity by enhanced rock veteran. And this limitation is particularly important in the farmland because often we are applying nitrogen fertilizers to promote the crop yield. And part of the applied nitrogen will go through the nitrification to generate those strong acids, right? And here we show that there will be a trade-off between using nitrogen fertilizer to promote the crop yields versus using enhanced raw veteran to remove carbon dioxide. Basically, with increasing nitrogen fertilizer application, there will be a direct deduction of carbon dioxide removal across all the soils investigated in this study. And also, beyond all these, complex processes in geochemical reactions and biological processes, we also identify the importance of climate in influencing the carbon dioxide removal. In general, a warmer and more humid condition will trigger faster veteran kinetics, and therefore, eventually, when other conditions are kept as the same, there will be faster carbon dioxide removal accumulation. And putting all the key limitations together, we have this matrix simulation. And basically, we as you can see from this figure, you can see the influence of the changes in soil properties versus, the influence of changes in climate gradient. And also, within each panel, we investigate how the human measurements, such as the amount of silicate raw dust applied into the cropland versus the amount of nitrogen fertilizer applied, will influence the final carbon dioxide removal at specific time point, which is quantified by the vertical axis of each of these panels. So to summarize, regarding the soil ion carbon filtration, while developing the cosine model, we found that actually there is a bounded complexities between the veteran and carbon dioxide removal. On the one hand, soil biology, such as the organic acids, will delay the timing of carbon sequestration. And on the other hand, actually the nitrogen nitrification from the fertilizer applications will directly reduce the amount of carbon sequestration by enhanced raw veteran. So that's the two takeaways from my study regarding the soil ion carbon. But if we further pose these two carbon giants together, we will find actually throughout my research, the biggest takeaway is that we found that in the soil system, actually all the above ground and below ground processes, as well as those biotic and abiotic components, they are coupled together to influence our final carbon dynamics. For example, the above ground plant carbon input is the origin of soil on carbon, but eventually we found actually it's a below ground soil microbes to decide the final organic carbon storage, right? For the soil ion carbon, while the idea of enhanced raw veteran came from geochemical reactions, but we found actually both the soil biology and also the human measurement will regulate the timing and the capacity of carbon dioxide removal. That means actually to better understand the role of the soil system in the global carbon cycle and also its contribution to a potential contribution to global sustainability, actually we need to take a cross-scale and systematic approach in scientific research, not only limited to the soil system, but investigating the role of soil carbon coupled with other key components of the Earth system, such as the plant dynamics, human management, and also other critical cycles, for example, the nitrogen cycle and the water cycle. So that's why in the next few probably 10 minutes, I will first introduce a little bit about the key challenge in the future research and our preliminary research on addressing those challenges. So basically, to tackle more complex questions, we also need to address some rising challenges. And in the context of the cross-scale investigation, introduce more data and a more complex model will definitely lead to a more extensive computational resources requirement. And in this case, actually, our product approach may not be enough to handle those questions. For example, in product, if we want to incorporate, for example, 2,000 soil carbon profiles into a mechanism model, actually the CPU time needed will be almost 600 hours. This actually, if you are using a personal computer, this will be about 1 month for you to finish. And most of the time, when you are, most of the time will be used in the Bayesian inference algorithm embedded in the product approach. And actually, this level of computation may be, still feasible if you have access to like a cluster. But, in the future, the data size we are talking will be at a million scale. And in this case, even a cluster may be not enough. So it's critical that we need to if we can figure out a more efficient data model fusion approach to accelerate the training and optimization. On the other hand, actually, soil data is a little bit different from those graded remote sensing data, mainly because most of the time different types of data will distributed quite irregularly across the world. And most of the time, they are extremely unbalanced in terms of the data sizes. For example, now we have like tens of thousands of soil organic carbon or inorganic carbon data, but we probably only have a few hundred radiocarbon data that records the soil carbon age across the whole globe. So actually, that imposes a challenge, to design some algorithms to learn from different types of data with different sizes. And then eventually we can simultaneously generalize all this information to the global scale. And this actually, in terms of computer science also relates to, strategies for multi-objective optimization, right? So eventually, beyond these two challenges, actually, as I mentioned, we are developing a new mechanism model. And actually, the mechanism modeling is a core part of my AI tools to explore those scientific questions. Basically, in the product approach, we use a linear soil organic carbon model to inform the neural network. But now we have the cosine model, and basically which considers an array of processes much beyond the soil organic carbon dynamics. And also this model extends our, the soil carbon dynamics from the spatial pattern to its temporal dynamics. And in the meantime, we also, increase the original, 100 some ordinary differential equations to more than 500 ordinary differential equations to represent the soil carbon soil system dynamics. And actually, most of those ordinary differential equations are nonlinear. So while we can appreciate the complexity of those new models to represent more comprehensive dynamics, it also brings trouble to our cross-scale study. That's mainly because solving those high-dimensional nonlinear ordinary differential equation per se, even numerically, is extremely challenging, even if not impossible. And in addition, how to better incorporate this model and big data using AI is another level of challenge. We're not sure actually, whether we can really use AI to handle those, ordinary differential equations at large scales to do optimization. So to resolve this issue, we need new ideas. So basically, our new proposal is to establish a soil carbon foundation model. Basically, by saying foundation, I'm not only addressing the big data as conventional foundation model ideas, but instead we particularly address the importance of the process guidance from the mechanism modeling. And we call this platform as Pascal, that is a process-guided and AI-assisted soil carbon foundation model. And in this model, actually, the key algorithm is a so-called biogeochemistry-informed neural network. We call it BEAM. Basically, the neural network, this neural network learns the relationship between the environmental variables and the parameters in the mechanism model that are biogeochemically interpretable in our theoretical simulation. And in this case, actually, the mechanistic model will receive the neural network predicted parameter values and then further simulates the soil carbon dynamics, which will be further used to be compared with the real-world observations, such as soil organic carbon and inorganic carbon storage. And eventually, hopefully, we want to propose those emerging solutions for the global sustainability based on the soil system. And actually, eventually, if we can realize this Pascal modeling platform, actually, there will be three outstanding features. First, it will be fast in optimization to accurately simulate soil carbon dynamics. And second, it should demonstrate quite inclusiveness to different types of data so that we can do multi-objective optimization. And eventually, it should be 100% interpretable, even if it's a AI tool, such that we could explore those science-based solutions to the climate change. And actually, we have preliminarily explored the idea at Cornell. Basically, by mentoring two PhD students, Hardy and Josh, we have developed a prototype for the soil organic carbon dynamics. And this figure shows, the changes in terms of the computational efficiency. Basically, after implementing the beam, for the same task, we could achieve more than 50 times faster than the original product approach. This means actually we are reducing a cluster level computation task to a personal computer level. And in the future, basically, you can just use your PC to do those big data model fusion and optimization in your research. And in addition, we also test the performance of Beam in dealing with multi-objective optimization. And this figure shows that, when we are using three different types of soil organic carbon, that is soil organic carbon content as a whole, and microbial associated organic carbon, as well as particular organic carbon together to inform the beam, how will the final results be like? We can see actually, even the data size is extremely uneven. Actually, our beam successfully incorporate different types of data information into the mechanistic model. And eventually, the model performance was all pretty high and unbiased. Actually, this is indicating that in the future, no matter what kind of data you have or how big your data is, we can all incorporate them at one time to optimize your model your predictions. And last and most important, we test the ability of our algorithm in doing causal inference. Basically, we design a causal recovery experiment to test the issue. And, basically, this idea is about, for the mechanistic model, we first prescribe some parameter values, and then we generate, based on the prescribed parameter values, we can generate some model simulation results. And then we further, took those model simulation results as a pseudo observations to be put into the Beam algorithm. And in the same time, we give no information to the Beam regarding the prescribed parameter values. But after Beam, actually, we are able to generate some optimized parameter values, right? That's the so-called recovered parameter values. And in this case, actually, if the Beam can retrieve the real reasons of those observations, in this case, actually, the recovered parameter values should be in a high agreement with those prescribed parameter values, right? And that's exactly what all the four parameters of interest in this test are all will on the line of on the one versus one line, which is indicating that while the Beam, if you put the observations into the Beam algorithm, basically we are able to recover the underlying causes, of the observation. And eventually, with leveraging those right reasons, we can, eventually we can predict the real values of soil carbon dynamics. And this is exciting because it's indicating that using the Beam algorithm, we could also leverage AI to do the causal inference that is far more efficient than the conventional, Bayesian inference. Basically, we have submitted the related manuscript to a journal, and it's also available for archive if you are interested. And actually, but still, I have to say we are still at the early stage in developing the Bing and Pascal. Now we are still using a quite simple linear soil carbon model. And in the future, our target is to incorporate the whole nonlinear cosine model into the Pascal and for further, scientific inquiries. And I have developed a research working group on this issue. In addition to Howdy and Josh, we have 3 other members working on different aspects of artificial intelligence and soil carbon science. So a final conclusion. What is the major message from this presentation? Basically, we are talking about both science and technology, right? In terms of science, I want to highlight that basically understanding the formation and storage of soil carbon and its interaction with other components in the Earth system is critical for innovating those soil-based solutions to climate change. But still, relevant studies at large scale are still at their early stages. And in terms of methodology, basically, I want to emphasize that, combining AI, big data, and mechanistic modeling actually provides a promising, revenue for us to explore in the future. But basically, the process-guided and AI-assisted foundation model will be foundational in approaching those, science-backed, global sustainability in the future. So before taking questions, I would also like to thank all my, amazing advisors and my wonderful collaborators across the world. Well, thank you very much.